I've seen the headlines that are like, giving your kid an allowance is the worst thing you can do, and stop paying your kids for chores. And then I've seen all of the opposite headlines saying why you must pay your kids for chores, why they must have an allowance, why they need a commission. There's all these different words and buzzwords. And I've read all of these articles, I've read all of the books, all of the things that I could find on the subject, and this is what I've come up with. We have an entire system for how we pay our 5 kids with chores, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Please don't forget to subscribe for all the videos on money, minimalism, and our travel journey around the world. We publish a new video every week. The popular book, Make Your Kid a Money Genius, talks about how you shouldn't link an allowance with chores. It also says how you shouldn't bribe your kids for good behavior or good grades by paying them for them. But then Dave Ramsey turns around and says you should put your kids on a commission, which is a similar thing. But he says you shouldn't give them an allowance, meaning that you give them money for not doing anything. And those are both great books, and there's a lot of great ideas in there. And what I've come to realize is that semantics plays a huge role in this, but everyone's basically saying the same thing. Don't pay your kids for no reason. And I agree, you shouldn't pay your kids for no reason, so I want to lay out the specific system we use for our kids. It may seem a little intense at first, but you can take little pieces from it and you can mold and make your own system. This is just what we do. Let's talk about rent versus paycheck. Just like some people use the terms allowance and the terms commission, we use the terms rent and paycheck. Any job they do is interchangeable with the word chore and job. Basically, we want our kids to understand that it's not free to live. It's not free to live in a home. Nothing is free. You have to pay for things. Whenever I say it's not free to live in our home, of course our kids are not going to be evicted. That's not part of our chore system, but we do want them to understand where money comes from, work ethic, grit, things like that. Most of this is done through countless conversations, the intentional conversations, and this is done through our chore system as well. So first, let's talk about rent. With rent, each child has a certain chore or set of chores, depending on their age, that pays their share of the rent. If they don't complete this, they just simply have to pay rent. If they do complete this, the rent is paid. That's how the rent works. Let's talk about the paycheck. With the paycheck, likewise, each child has a chore or chores that they are paid for. This is their weekly paycheck. I'll explain how the weekly paycheck works in a minute. And by the way, another point that everyone can agree on is that you need to be consistent with your method. Whatever method you use, chores, commission, allowance, whatever, pay them consistently, regularly, pay them preferably on the same day of the week, every week. When everyone is completing all of their chores and doing everything they're supposed to be doing, our home functions like a normal home, as it should. It's whenever our kids start slacking off or not doing the things they're responsible for that things start to get interesting. If someone doesn't complete their paycheck chore, they don't get paid for that day. Plain and simple. And as our kids get older, they get more chores, so it's possible to get paid for one but not for another. The interesting thing comes in whenever someone fails to complete all of their chores for 3 days in a row, because at that point, they can be fired.
You're fired.
I say can be because obviously different things and life events play a role in this. If we're gone on vacation, if we're really busy with something's going on at school, we're not super hard about this. It's just a basic idea. But once one of the kids is fired from a job, the other kids have the opportunity to apply for the job, including a full-blown job interview. So when a new candidate takes on another child's job, it usually only goes on for about a week, and then the job goes back to the original person. What's interesting is who pays the new hire. Simply put, the child who got fired is the one who pays the child who just took their job. This can kind of symbolize what it feels like to literally lose your job because of lack of discipline or work ethic or whatever. So it's a level of hardship that they can understand. 1 week of them paying their sibling for their job, and then it goes back and they have another chance. Obviously, it's a lot less harsh than what would happen if they were actually at a job and actually got fired, but it gives them the same idea. Running the family business. This may sound really complicated at first, but it's actually not that difficult, and the kids love it now that we've finally fully implemented it. So far, there hasn't been any sort of unhealthy competitive spirit in our home. So our kids aren't fighting for other kids' jobs or anything crazy like that. Maybe they would have if we hadn't explained why we do it like this in the first place and how we're trying to teach them life skills without being too harsh on them. So now they can understand the basics of having a job, the benefits of doing well at a job, and what happens if you don't do well at your job, and the repercussions of getting fired from a job without actually having to get fired from a real job. Some parents love our system, some parents have criticized our system and said that we're being too strict and too harsh. And I think it would stress out our kids if we ran it like a bunch of dictators, but we don't run the business like that. It's all ran out of love and education, and they see the benefit behind it and they know why we do it like this. Our kids couldn't be happier with the system. They have the opportunity to make quite a bit of money and even more bonus or extra money, as we're going to talk about in just a moment. And our kids have learned more about work and life life and the balance than anything else we've ever implemented. It's all in how you implement it and how you use those intentional conversations to make all of this a life lesson. That's where the real value comes from, these crucial conversations, teachable moments. Let's talk odd jobs and negotiation skills. I think it would be great if we taught negotiation skills in school to some extent, but we don't, so it's our job as parents to teach that at home. And one of the best ways we've found to teach our kids negotiation skills is through odd jobs around the home and how they can negotiate for what they get paid for those jobs. So when one of our kids wants to earn extra money, they look around the house, see what needs to be done on top of the regular chores, and they come to us with a proposal. They simply tell us what needs to be done and how much they're willing to do it for. So we can either accept their offer, we can decline their offer and explain why, or we can negotiate with them. So here's a recent scenario. Child: I noticed there's a lot of rocks from the gravel part of our yard that have made their way into the grassy part of our yard, and I'm willing to pick up all of those rocks for $10. Us: let's go check it out. We see that there are plenty of rocks scattered throughout the grass, which creates a problem for the mower and the weed eater, so we decide the job needs to be done. Us: we would like you to pick up the rocks, but $10 is high for a job that looks like it'll take less than an hour. How about $5? In the beginning, they would usually take whatever we offered, but we've taught them to at least try to negotiate. Child: $10 may be too high, but the work is tedious, and I'm saving you guys from having to do it. What about $7? Us: $7 it is, but only if you do a good job and get the vast majority of the rocks. If we have to come behind you and pick up several additional rocks, we'll still pay you the original $5. Does that work for you? Child: yep, I'm on it. In this scenario, the child knows they're going to make less money if they don't do a good job, so they'll usually get all the rocks. And they learn the value of negotiation and the value of getting paid for what your job is worth. The harder they work, the more they earn. This is work for you and your kids. This whole method in general of having the jobs and the hiring and the job interviews and the paying them weekly, it requires a lot of dedication on your part, and you have to stay consistent with it, but it's a great teacher. It's not something you can tell your kids you're doing and then forget about. Your kids will not forget about it because there's money involved. So make sure you pay them consistently. Find a good day of the week that works as a payday. Sundays are good, Fridays are good, and stay consistent with that. If you decide to pay them with actual cash, don't forget to go by the ATM the day or two before so that you can actually give them the money. If you pay them digitally like we do with an app or some system or a spreadsheet, then you can just put the money in their account, but make sure they see that happening. Another option to pay them is you can actually print off pretend paychecks, and you can fill them out and they can get those checks, and then that serves as their amount of money, and you can just keep up with it on your end to make sure you have that money set aside, but they just have an actual check like they would with a job. I mean, it's going to direct deposit now for most jobs, but gives them the idea of an actual physical paycheck is what they need to see. Typically, the younger they are, the more you want those physical paychecks or physical dollars so they can see it actually happening. Older kids can understand, I'm putting $10 or $5 in your account. They can see it happening and they can still know that they're going to have that money. But for younger kids, it's really important to have the actual physical paycheck or dollars. I'll put a link below to download some pretend paychecks if you want to do that. Hopefully you like this system. Try it out. Let me know what you think. Comment below. Let me know what you do now or some ideas you've had. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you want to dive into this concept even more of paying your kids for work and work ethic and grit and all this, check out my new book, Intentional Children. I have an entire chapter talking about kids and work. Please don't forget to subscribe for all these videos on money, minimalism, our travel journey around the world. That is all for today. I will see you next week.